46%. That's a large number. So what specific data is that related to? Well, surprisingly and disappointingly, it is related to our first year attrition for nursing students in the nursing program. So if that's a statistic you're not familiar with, I want to share that one. That is reported based on data that was collected by ATI that actually says in their 2022 survey of nurse educators, 46% reported that students are having an increased rate of first year attrition. So almost 1 out of 2 nurse educators reported that. And what else did they say? They also reported that 71% said that students in their first year of nursing school struggled in their courses. Now, for most of us, that's not a surprising statistic, right? Because almost 2/3 of students struggle in their first year. And one of the main reasons why is because they haven't developed those study skills that they need to in order to perform well in the nursing program. So what is it that we can do to ensure that we tackle head on the 71% of students who are struggling? Well, I know so many of you have already addressed this concern because it's not new. As I mentioned, this data was reported back in 2022 by ATI. Welcome back, everybody, to Dr. Sellars Educate. If this is the first time you are tuning in, welcome. We are delighted that you're here. A little bit about Dr. Sellars Educate is that we are on a mission to support all nurse educators to achieve success on the NLN CNE exam. We also are here, second of all, to support nurse educator excellence. That means that we provide content right here on our YouTube channel, or if you listen to our podcast, but we align our content with the curriculum that is based on the detailed test blueprint and ultimately the nurse educator competencies that are outlined by NLN. So first things first, let's make sure you have the right resources. Okay, that's a very important step on your journey. So first, we want you to print out your study worksheet. Okay, if you haven't done that already, make sure you take time to do that before you tune into every snapshot. It is listed right here in the description, whether you're on our podcast or if you are on our YouTube channel. Second resource is Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing. We're currently in the 6th edition as of 2024. So if you're watching this episode of this snapshot, as soon as it is released, then you know that 2024, the NLN revised their exam. So there's now 2 new versions, and it is mapped to the 6th edition of Billings and Halstead. All right, and then the next resource you want to have in front of you is going to be your detailed test blueprint. Okay, that is also located on the NLN website. So that's nln.org inside of the candidate handbook. So each of the exams have their own candidate handbook, and that's what you want to print out to make sure you're closing your knowledge gaps as you are moving forward on hopefully your 7-week journey. And as a supplemental resource, this was a request from many of nurse educator colleagues across the country that were what we call our early adopters. So in the study workbook, and yes, that's located right here in the description as well, where you're going to see is a contents page that lists the specific competencies and behaviors associated with those listed by competencies. Okay, so as an example, part 1 for teacher strategies, we focus heavily on educational theory, clinical judgment, and learner diversity and inclusivity. Okay, so you may wonder why those 3 topics? Well, those are the primary gap areas that more than 70% of nurse educators struggle with on their journey. Okay, so we're very intentional as we develop our curriculum because we want you to move forward on the journey to achieve nurse educator excellence and to be successful on the exam with ease and efficiency. Okay, that is what we're all about right here at Dr. Sellars Educate. All right, so in this snapshot, we're continuing our focus, I should say, on community. What are those key skills that we're bringing into our students' learning experiences really to help them hone in on those must-know competencies and to validate that knowledge is actually transferred in a way that students can apply and analyze the decisions that they're making in the clinical setting with every single situation, every single clinical experience that they have. All right, so let's take a look at our thought-provoking question. This is how we always like to start. So here we go. So it says, which approach best exemplifies a nurse educator's role in modeling behaviors that enhance a community of learning according to the NLN Nurse Educator Competency 1, facilitate learning. All right, so here we go. 3 choices to align with the revised NLN CNE exam. So number 1, emphasizing comprehensive assessments to encourage students to individually strive for higher academic achievement. B says designing course activities that require peer-to-peer teaching and collaborative problem solving, fostering interdependence among students. Option C, focusing on standardized tests as a primary method of evaluation to ensure consistency and fairness in student assessment. All right, so this is what we want you to do. Every single thought-provoking question, we want you to think about 2 things. Number 1, what is this question asking me? Okay, and then number 2, what is it that I know for sure about content related to this question? What you will find on your 7-week journey, 60-day journey, maybe even 90-day journey, is that you can expect for at least 70 to 80% of the questions to be at that application or analysis level, okay? So taking a look at Billings and Halstead, pages 188 through 190 is gonna give you a good foundation of Bloom's taxonomy related to all 3 learning domains. And then table 14.1, this is what we want you to take a look at and to have a deep understanding of the learning theories, the specific tenets or underpinnings associated with those categories of learning theories. And second of all, how are those teaching strategies showing up in your classroom to align with those learning theories, right? We want to engage in evidence-based teaching strategies and evaluation strategies, but that's for another day. In this snapshot, we're just focusing on how we create this community of support as we help students move through the trajectory and continue in our nursing program. When we think about the admission process, we want to consider what are those specific traits that we have identified in our student population that leads them to being more successful. Okay, so just looking at the data to ensure that we are making these evidence-based decisions about students that we are accepting in our nursing programs. All right, so think about this question, and I'll give you all a second just to take a look at it, and then we're going to go ahead and switch over to our content in this snapshot. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about the best option for you, and now we're going to take a look at the content. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're looking at exactly what are these teaching strategies that we're talking about, and more importantly, how are we going to implement them in our classroom in a way that is going to support the student learning process. That's what we're focused on, is how can we ensure that students are well equipped with the skills that they need to be successful in the classroom? How can we combat this attrition that we're continuing to see in our nursing program? Now I want you to think about that last student that was challenged in your course. I want you to consider what were the barriers that prevented them from learning and moving forward in the program. So maybe this is a student that you weren't able to turn around and they ended up not being successful in your course. So I want you to think about, number 1, what were some of the barriers that led to that student not being successful? It could be that they were working. It could be that they had a lot of test anxiety, or it could be that they just weren't well prepared. But whatever that reason, I want you to go ahead and write that down on your study worksheet, okay? And then I want you to think about, as we're talking through our content today, think about if any of these strategies that we are going to discuss, if that could have resulted in a better outcome for your student. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I just want you to consider that one situation with the student that wasn't successful, and if there are any additional interventions that you could have engaged in to better prepare them for success. Okay, and now we're ready to go to the content and take a look at what are some of these strategies that we're talking about that aligns with the evidence. Specifically, I want you to take a look in your textbooks, again, where Billings and Halstead is the resource that we're using. And there are several different sections that really tie back to community. But for purposes of our time in this snapshot, we are going to align it with these evidence-based teaching strategies that we are talking about. And you're going to take a look on page 427 through 430. Okay, this is in Billings and Halstead. And if you'll turn there with me, I want us to take a look at exactly what it says. Okay, to no surprise, it says first and foremost, we want to develop a collaborative relationship with our students. What does that look like? Well, first and foremost, it means being accessible for our students, to demonstrate caring behaviors, such as showing up on time for class, showing up for office hours, communicating to our students that we are supportive of them, that we want to help them work through challenging situations. And looking on page 428, I like how it describes the Chamberlain University Culture of Care model that is cited from 2017. And it says it focuses on the care of self, colleagues, and students to fulfill the mission to educate, empower, and embolden diverse healthcare professionals who advance the health of people, families, and nations. So think about that. Think about how this specific statement and really the overarching expectation of us developing this community of support, how that shows up in your classroom, specifically with that student that wasn't successful. Just think about what ways did you show up for that student? And perhaps, as I said, there's nothing else that could have been done differently, but that's what we want to think about when we're discussing attrition. What are those factors that could have helped that student get back on track and to ultimately be successful? We want to be able to understand these causes of attrition. That is how we take the next step in our nursing program to decrease burnout, to decrease cognitive overload, and that overload and burnout for us as faculty, but also ensure that we are aligning content in our curriculum that students must know versus content that is nice to know. What else is it that we want to focus on? Identifying, first and foremost, what are those 4 factors that are contributing to the issue of student attrition? Okay, so what are some of these factors? And how can we as faculty improve the situation? Well, there are 4 contributing factors that we want to focus on in this snapshot. Number 1 is student motivation. The question is, how can we encourage students to be more engaged? Well, it starts with us integrating these high impact teaching strategies that leverage the student as an adult in the classroom, using a flipped classroom model where we're starting the learning process before students even enter our doorway, asking students to complete a ticket to class, right? And they can't enter our classroom until they have completed that ticket to class. What else can we do? Curriculum adaptation. So thinking about personalizing our curriculum, making revisions to our courses, to include even our textbooks, and using more digital textbooks to make sure the students have resources that's available to them. Can we include the textbook fee inside of the tuition rate, right? We know that there are additional fees. So can that be grouped together so that students don't experience finances as a barrier? And we know that there are resources that are available to our students. We want to refer them to the financial aid office to provide additional guidance or maybe even identify additional funding. Okay, so thinking about curriculum adaptation, something as simple yet very important as textbook access. Number 3 is mental health awareness. Where can students go for help when they feel frustrated, when they feel overwhelmed? What are those resources that we have in place on campus? And what are the hours of availability? And perhaps there's off-campus or virtual options as well. Okay, so just considering what are the options that students have available to take care of their mental health. And then number 4 is faculty support. First of all, we need to make sure we have the support that we need, right, to support our student success. And then what is the support that our students are going to need from us in order to help them remain in the program? I do want to point out when we talk about motivation, we know that has to come from within, right? However, there are learning experiences that we can create for our students, such as changing the environment when our students are first coming in, to add music, like you all heard at the beginning of this snapshot, to really create a different type of energy, right? And a different vibe in the classroom. All right, so that's seen as creating a positive environment for our students, because they're coming in, hopefully getting in a positive mindset, right? Where they can be open and receptive to the learning process. So just lighten up the mood a little bit. All right, so until next time, this is going to conclude our content, but before we go, we always like to answer our thought-provoking question. So let's take a look and see what you thought about this question. The best option for the thought-provoking question. So B is going to be the best option. So let's talk about why. And remember that that's exactly what the purpose is of these questions, is we want to stimulate thought around the content that is included. So designing course activities that require peer-to-peer teaching and collaborative problem solving, fostering interdependence among students is going to be the best option. Let's talk about why A is not correct. Well, first and foremost, it talks about emphasizing comprehensive assessments. Well, we want to make sure that we're emphasizing all of the ways that we assess learning with our students, right? And the second part, encouraging students to individually strive for higher academic achievement. Well, that's good language, but that really isn't aligned or really related to our focus of enhancing a community of learning, right? So that one is a little suspicious based on some of the verbiage that's being used. So we will continue to look at the other options. So let's take a look at C. Focusing on standardized tests as the primary method of evaluation. Well, each type of evaluation is equally important, right? So we don't want it to be perceived based on C that we put more weight on our standardized test. So that's why that one would not be the best. So if you chose B, give yourself a round of applause, and hopefully you have better understanding why A and C were not correct if you did happen to choose those, okay? So until next time, we are delighted that you joined us. Make sure you reach out to us. DrSellarseducate.com is our website. And if you have other questions, info@DrSellarseducate.com, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have. We look forward to seeing you in our next snapshot. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.